Hello and welcome to Breaking Down Bergman, a very different episode of Breaking Down Bergman. I'm David Friend, and Sonia Strimban isn't here today. She's actually back in Canada. I'm in Los Angeles, however, where I had a chance to speak with Michael Moon, who's the president of Demon Theater, which is a theater troupe that performs Bergman films on the stage. And he talked to me about the motivation for his plans and their upcoming tour of Sweden.
My name is Michael Moon, and I'm president of a company called Demon Theater in Los Angeles. We're a theater company dedicated to celebrating the works of Ingmar Bergman and certain elements of Swedish culture. We present new English translations of Bergman works, including early plays, screenplays, radio plays, all in new translations for a live audience. With each production, we prepare and serve homemade Swedish food to create, to the best of our ability, more of a sense of a community between performers and audience. We started off with one of his films called Djävulens that we adapted, followed it up with 5 translations of radio plays, stage plays, and films, sort of back to back. And from there, have adapted a one-woman show that he wrote initially as a film experiment, which turned into a radio play, which we will now present at Bergman Week.
So why Bergman?
My wife, Anna, and I both loved his films and loved the writing and the text, the tone, everything about them. And when we went to Bergman Week in 2007, saw his film Devil's Eye, and as soon as it opened, we got this, wow, this would be a great stage play. This is so theatrical. This is like watching a Moliere play.
You were you had immersed yourself in Bergman and at some point had decided to head to Bergman Week because of that?
When I first got kind of obsessed was probably 2002 or 2003 when I saw Winter Light for the first time. And when I saw it, I was like, this would be a really good play, this could work on stage. And somebody talked me out of it. And it wasn't until years later that we saw Devil's Eye that Bergman twisted on his arm. And my wife's family is from the island right next to there, so we timed a family trip to visit them with Bergman Week, and we caught a few things there, and just sort of grew from there. And we saw that internationally for years there have been stage productions of his works all over the world, and thought we would give it a try. And the more we started researching and reading the scripts, we realized that we love the films, but we also love the writing. And reading the material is such a different experience from even watching it. And the feeling you get is so different. There's a real vibrancy, a real kind of fire in the words when you read them.
So Bergman Week, for you, can you give me just a bit of a summary?
When you go there, it's this beautiful, just, the best word I can think to describe it is magical place. You feel like you're on the surface of the moon walking around this island, the wind's blowing all the time, and you're surrounded by churches and barns, and lamb walk freely around the island, but then you realize that some of the most impactful films of the world were filmed right here in this farmland. When we performed there last year, we were kind of terrified, and we wanted to do a good job because we're surrounded by incredible filmmakers and artists from around the world that love Bergman, and here we were presenting a Bergman play that hadn't been seen since the 40s, and we're doing it in English, and we're doing it in a Barn, which is now my favorite theater in the world, and were just terrified. But the reception, the audience, and the respect they had for Bergman was really inspiring. I've never been in an atmosphere like that before with anything, where there's such like unity among people and such respect amongst everyone for everyone because of the common interest in what this one man did. You know, we went there in some ways worried that we might be ostracized for screwing something up. That's great, but we're so welcomed. It was really, really moving and very inspiring. Last year, there were in the audience members of Bergman's family and actors that had appeared in his films over the years. And Inga Landgren, who was the lead in several of his early movies and appeared in his movies throughout, showed up at the theater. And afterwards, she said the nicest thing you could ever hear. She was crying, and she says, "Thank you, Ingmar. Ingmar was all over this." The Day Ends Early was the play we did. It's a really, for us, a really special piece of writing. But that particular play seemed to have the seeds of so many of the later masterpieces in it.
For example, what?
The final scene of Day Ends Early is in the afterlife, and this group of people who have died over the course of the last few hours of the play end up in this very dark place and have to hold hands as they walk off into the afterlife. The imagery is so similar to the Dance of Death at the end of Seventh Seal.
You've sort of talked about the response you've received from audiences that worked with Bergman, but what about audiences in general that you have performed for? And I'm assuming that you have performed to people who are so familiar with Bergman.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people said, "Wow, I had no idea he was so funny. That was so entertaining. It reminds me of this. It reminds me of that." When we did, particularly when we did a 10-week series of stage readings on Sunday afternoons in a little theater. We made homemade food for everybody, and then we would present our translations. And the response was just great. People were like, "Wow, I'm going to go get some Bergman movies and watch them." And then people would say, "Wow, it's so different. It's like I watched the play, and then I watched the movie, and it's like I saw two different things, even though it's the same story, and I like them both for different reasons." It was interesting with a lot of the American friends that we had there. They're like, "Yeah, I always thought Bergman was just this depressing, artsy-fartsy stuff." It's like, no, not really. I think it all depends on how you look at it. But then when they saw this, they went out and watched the other movies, and now we've sort of converted some people into watching these things.
I think it takes that extra little effort to get over the hump of seeing him as that type of director, because on the surface it kind of is. And most of his films, if that's what you're going in thinking, you're going to find those answers. Because
even in Smiles of a Summer Night, even though it's light and fun, it's like, well,
he still kind of slaps you with reality at the end of it.
Yeah, and in the beginning, and you get these things.
So you're talking about making the food. So this is an experience that's broader than just performing.
Yeah, in a lot of the interviews with Bergman and things we read about when he was doing theater, he talked about the importance of touching all the senses, or as many senses as possible. So he was directing a play where he wanted the smell of birch in the theater. And they said, "No, you can't do it." It's like, "Well, you can get me that smell or I'll clean out my office." So the next day they worked it out so he could have that. But we thought it was important to, on a lot of levels, people come in and they get this nice smell of some homemade food. And that's a little comforting.
So what kind of food is it? What's Bergman food?
Well, Anna makes a lot of really rustic country food from her island. Of course, people want Swedish meatballs, so they come in and have that. And then there's what's called sandwich cake, which is so much better than it sounds. During the summer, homemade ice creams like saffron ice creams, and then whatever is whipped up. But a lot of it is, you know, creating a memorable experience for people, but also showing that they're part, we're all part of the same thing together, and afterwards everyone's sort of getting together to eat and to talk about whatever, just to communicate, to take a little of the have a little more of a connection.